Somebody's bring some carpeting or something to put on here. Calling the meeting to order. This is meeting number 27 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. With regard to interpretation, for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Should any technicalities arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes in order to ensure that all members are able to participate fully in the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, June 6th, the committee is beginning its study of potential impacts of the ArrivaCAN application on certain Canadian sectors. We have with us today from Customs and Immigration Union, Mark Weber, National President by video conference. I believe he's having some technical difficulties, so I'm talking a little bit slowly so that he can get connected. From Frontier Duty Free Association, Barbara Barrett, Executive Director. And from Ocella Technologies, we have Douglas Lovegrove, President. And from the Niagara Falls Bridge Commission, Kenneth Beeger, Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out. We know we didn't give you a lot of notice for this, so we very much appreciate you coming.
Mr. Weber's good to go.
Okay, Mr. Weber is good to go. All right, Mr. Weber, we're glad you're connected. I invite you to make an opening statement, sir, of up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Mark Weber. I'm the National President of the Customs and Immigration Union, which represents personnel working for the Canada Border Services Agency, the CBSA. I'll be brief. Following the recent announcement that the use of the ArrivaCAN application would no longer be mandatory, it is hard to convey the relief that border officers across the country must be feeling. While border officers take great pride in their duty to serve the Canadian public, I know with great certainty that none of them imagine that the best use of a trained law enforcement officer would be to provide IT support due to really an ill-designed app that failed to take into account the idiosyncrasies at our borders. I've said it before, I'll say it again, from the perspective of border operations, as far as border officers are concerned, the last months have shown that ArrivaCAN fails to facilitate cross-border travel while doing very little to address the severe gaps in border security that are plaguing our country. At the risk of repeating what has been highlighted time and time again, the implementation of ArrivaCAN really follows the same pattern of over-reliance on automated technologies that we've seen before with primary inspection kiosks and that we're now starting to see with e-gates. It's a misguided approach that senselessly sets aside any security considerations. What I urge the government and the agency to do now is to turn their attention to the severe deficit in personnel afflicting border services throughout the country. The reality is really bleak. The agency needs thousands of more officers if it wishes to fulfill its mandate. This past summer alone, at some of its busiest land border crossings, the CBSA often had little choice but to choose between properly staffing commercial operations or traveler operations. And that's to say little of what it simply cannot do, which is adequately curb the smuggling of dangerous goods, despite the sustained efforts of its officers. Ultimately, what the failure of ArrivaCAN shows us is that our government must continue to invest in people to best serve people and reconsider its pursuit of a one-size-fits-all technological panacea. In conclusion, it's my hope that the union's input will assist the committee in this important work. I thank you for the opportunity, and I do look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. Ms. Barrett, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members, for having me here today. My name is Barbara Barrett. I'm the Executive Director of the Frontier Duty Free Association, representing the land border duty-free stores across Canada. Since the creation of the land border duty-free program in 1982, the federal government and small, locally run family businesses have cooperated in building local border communities by driving export sales and repatriating Canadian dollars. These small local retail businesses have made significant contributions to local employment, taxation, and business growth. In addition, these independent stores have made strong contributions to the economies and social structures of some of the most remote rural communities in every province that shares a land border crossing with the United States. Together, these independently owned duty-free stores have come to represent an important and integral part of the tourism industry by repatriating sales and acting as ambassadors to visitors to our country. The stores continue to promote unique Canadian-made products and ensure visitors buy Canadian before leaving Canada. Importantly, any items not bought at these stores are lost sales to the Canadian economy and tax system and are simply bought in the U.S. stores a few hundred meters away across the border. From a federal government perspective, duty-free stores are an export industry success story, and the revenues generated through the small network of stores benefit the Canadian economy, create jobs, and promote trade. Pre-pandemic, land border duty-free stores repatriated over $1.5 billion in sales over 10 years, which would otherwise have been lost to the U.S., duty-free stores, and U.S. retailers. Total direct and indirect employment accounts for approximately 2,500 full-time employment Canadian jobs. They represent approximately $35 million per year in federal, provincial, and local taxes, and our operators have invested a total of more than $60 million in border communities. Now let's talk about the pandemic. The pandemic hit many sectors of the Canadian economy hard. But the closure of the Canadian-U.S. border for nearly 2 years literally shuttered Canada's land border duty-free sector. While many sectors of the tourism economy could run to domestic customers or even models like takeout or curbside pickup outdoors, our stores were forced into almost complete closure to keep Canadians safe from the raging COVID-19 cases in the United States. Simply put, if Canadians and Americans could not cross the border, then our stores could not, by federal law, make sales. We were, without exaggeration, the hardest hit of the hardest hit. But I do want to point out that with border closure starting March 2020, we were enormously grateful for the rent and wage subsidy supports provided to ours and other tourism businesses. With these, we were able to keep staff and are here to recover today. On behalf of my members, I wish to thank you for those supports. I also want to be clear that as supports ended in spring of 2022, the Canada-U.S. border was not truly open and, in fact, will not start to return to normal until this week, at the end of this week on October 1st. So this past summer, while the rest of Canada's economy was recovering, our border recovery stayed at 45 to 50% down from pre-pandemic levels due to federal restrictions and the required use of the ArriveCAN app. Hopes for a major end-of-season bounce-back in sales during Labor Day weekend, like the other long weekends in the summer, were crushed for duty-free store operators, as surveys indicated an average of 47% decrease in sales for Labor Day compared to the same period in 2019. And again, all while federal supports have ended. So yes, we would like to formally thank ministers for yesterday's exciting announcement to drop travel restrictions. Our federally regulated, independently owned small businesses have been devastated by the measures put in place at the border and have been left behind despite doing their part to help keep Canadians safe. So as a matter of industry survival, we are asking for a short-term financial bridge to get our stores to the other side of winter in the form of a modest loan program. We have proposed to Finance Canada a program that would earmark a total of $20 million in loan supports so our export businesses can continue to represent Canada at the border and continue as an important integral part of Canada's tourism fabric. Please ask yourselves, what business can be almost completely shut down for 20 months and then 50% down for several more months and still survive without support? I would be pleased to outline the nature of the support plan to members further and take any questions you might have about other policy areas such as the reinstatement of the visitor rebate program that can help our sector move from hardest hit to thriving and worldwide competitive. Thank you.
much. Mr. Lovegrove, please, for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, Committee, thank you very much for having me in attendance today. I'll make a brief opening statement here. I'm a owner of a company. We've not quite made it a year yet. We made the decision, myself and a few partners, to take this great leap in October of last year. And for up until just maybe a week or so ago, when we started hearing about the removal of the mandate for ArriveCan, it's felt like the government has had their foot on my throat. Where we exist in Windsor, just outside of the town of Windsor, we are 80% reliant on a U.S. customer base for our industry, and trying to get new business, trying to grow a new enterprise with this restriction has been very challenging. I'm very thankful that the federal government has decided to end the mandatory use of ArriveCan. Anyway, I'll end it there. I'll keep it brief, and I look forward to answering some specific questions about our industry.
Good to see you still standing and sitting there.
Is that sorry?
Just congratulating you on still standing and still sitting there.
Yes,
right?
yes. Thank you.
managed to do that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Baker, can we, the clerk needs to check a technical issue with you for a minute to make sure your system is working?
Can you hear me now?
Hello, Mr. Beeger.
Yes, can you hear me? You can.
I can hear you, but I'd like to verify with the interpreters. No. Sorry, could we try unplugging and replugging the headset, please?
Can you plug it in? Oh. Yep. Okay, she said we could plug it in or unplug it and plug it in. Yeah, can you hear me now? No.
No, unfortunately, the sound is still not coming through correctly for the interpreters on this end. I believe you're still on the phone with IT, so if you would allow me to just communicate with them, and perhaps we can assist you further. Sorry for the troubles.
Okay.
So it's as if, that's typically what I see in Zoom whenever it's picking up audio. Okay, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Beeger, while they're looking after your technical issues, we're going to start the questioning from the members. Mr. Baldinelli for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being with us today. And, today is World Tourism Day. And you know what? I'd like to thank all stakeholders, the advocacy effort, not only of our stakeholders, but that of all Canadians, the residents of my riding, the colleagues that sit at this table with me, for their actions in working so that we could get these restrictions and the ArriveCan application eliminated at our borders beginning this weekend. But again, it's this weekend. During COVID, we lost 2 tourism years. And unfortunately, we lost another tourism year this year. 2 years we could blame on COVID. This year, ladies and gentlemen, it was self-inflicted. We've been advocating for months that this application and the restrictions at the border be removed, joining the over 60 other countries that are out there, ending the restrictions at the border. And why did it take this government so long to take these actions? I've got a community of 40,000 people who work in the tourism sector, and they deserve better. My understanding was that the Liberal caucus met in Niagara in August, yet they did not hear from local stakeholders and their efforts and their needs to have this application removed. So with that, I'd like to begin asking some of the questions, if I could. I'll start with Mr. Weber. You know, it's kind of interesting. One of the stakeholders I talked to this summer was Mr. Bieber from the Niagara Falls Bridge Commission, and he talked about the difficulties and the staffing shortages. He also told me of the fact that the Canada Border Service Agency training center in Ottawa was closed for 2 years, and that was confirmed by Mr. Vinette from CBSA, and he mentioned about a cohort of about 600 officers being short. So I wonder if you could build on that, and you could talk about the staffing needs that are required so that places like communities like Niagara can have proper CBSA staffing levels.
Thank you very much for the question. I mean, our staffing shortages are severe. They exist across the country in every mode, at ports of entry and outside of ports of entry as well. One of the bigger problems we have currently is that we only use the one training center for our recruits, which means that the maximum number of new recruits that we could graduate every year is close to that 600 number that you used, which in reality barely covers attrition. So we're simply not getting our numbers up. There's an effort on the CBSA's part now to really get through as many as possible, but it's not nearly enough. So one of the things I think we really need to look at doing is to open a second, third training facility so that we get more recruits working at the front line. The shortages in your area, I can tell you, I mean, I could give you an example. Rainbow Bridge, currently they're operating with 48 officers. They were just a short while ago at over 100. So we're talking in some places needing to double and triple the amount of staff that we have. And that's not to mention the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge, which will, of course, increase the need for even more officers once that gets going.
Commission and Mr. Bieber. And I was wondering if he's online.
Yes. Mr. Bieber, can we check your connection again, please?
Here now? No.
No, doesn't.
Mr. Bieber, can you say one more sentence?
Can you hear me right now?
The interpreters. We're getting an okay, so let's give that a try, please, and we can verify if the interpretation will proceed.
I haven't lost any time because of that. Thank you for that. Mr. Rieger, I just want to follow up with you and some of the comments from Mr. Weber. And the Niagara Falls Bridge Commission actually controls the Rainbow Bridge. You had supplied a submission in July which talked about wait times being up almost 50%, even though, you know, traffic volumes being down 50%. Wait times almost of 2 hours. And, you know, that notion that the government was saying that ArriveCAN was intended to facilitate and increase processing times. And did you find that, in fact, happened at the bridges under your control?
No, ArriveCAN definitely did not speed up traffic. There's really a combination of three things. The CBSA staff short, the public health measures, and just the reporting of the vaccination requirement. And the third is the ArriveCAN. And so the problem that we saw was that it's hard to distinguish between the two. The ArriveCAN and the reporting requirement go together.
Mr. Rieger, can I just follow up on one question as well? Again, if I return to the fact that my understanding is the Ontario Liberal Caucus met in Niagara Falls and had no opportunity to meet with stakeholders. At that same time, the Public Safety Minister actually did an announcement at the Rainbow Bridge, which is an important issue to talk about the illegal flow of firearms into this country. But did he take that opportunity at all to mention and ask your offices about ArriveCAN and the impact that it was having on the Niagara Falls Bridge Commission?
No, no one met with us to discuss that. You know, again, what we're seeing is the ArriveCAN and the reporting requirement is the problem together. And what we saw is even the few times where there was more lanes open than a pre-pandemic, we saw there was delays in the traffic more than pre-pandemic.
How much time, or am I out of time? Oh, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Maloney, please, for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just want to clarify something before I ask questions. Mr. Baldinelli, not only was I at that meeting in Niagara Falls, I organized it. We met with many stakeholders. Okay, so listen, I have a number of questions for the witnesses. ArriveCAN has been subject to severe criticism. It's become a political football. The narrative around it is that it causes delay, it affects business in a negative way. In my experience, it's the people that I'm hearing from, it's largely because they are personally inconvenienced, because they're annoyed they have to take 5 minutes and do something on their phone, which they didn't have to do before. So, ma'am, I'm going to start with something you said. You said, we won't return to normal until this weekend. Does that mean that you believe with the lifting of the restrictions, specifically the removal of ArriveCAN, that on Saturday life will go back to normal at the border?
Oh, I would love that to be the case. I don't think that'll be the case. I think habits have been changed now since the border has been closed for so long.
Because that's what you said. You said it won't return to normal until this weekend.
Well, all the sticky points have been removed now, so there is now the potential for it to remove to normal. Will there be a floodgate of folks going over the border, and will it the traffic go back to normal?
Sorry to interrupt you. I only have limited time. Here's where I take issue a little bit with what you said.
Sure.
And as I said to you offline, I use your store quite regularly. And I'm using my ArriveCAN coming back quite frequently too. When people talk about ArriveCAN, really what they're talking about is the displeasure with having to show proof of vaccination. Now, as of Saturday, that will no longer be required to come back into Canada, but it will be required to go into the United States. So those same people who are upset about the vaccination proof in the United States still can't come in because they can't go back, they can't get back in. They're still going to have the same problems. And Canadians who aren't vaccinated are continue to have those same obstacles. So with all due respect, I don't think things are going to get back to normal. And I'm going to ask this question to Mr. B, is it Beeger? Yeah. And you, sir, you said you felt like the government had its foot on your throat. Your colleague to your left there acknowledged the business and support that were made available. I assume when you say you felt like the government had their foot to the throat, you also were talking about ArriveCAN? Yeah, would you like me to elaborate? No, let me finish, and I will. So, because when people talk about ArriveCAN, they're talking about a technology device that's going to help facilitate access through the border. So, for example, I've had extensive discussions with people at the Greater Toronto Airport Authority who are quite fond of ArriveCAN, and they want it to stay in place because it's an instrument that allows quicker movement through the airport. The problem is it's been stigmatized because of this vaccination connection. And so when you make statements like the government has had its foot on your throat, I think that's a little bit unfair because as we heard from some of the other witnesses, you're talking about staffing shortages and COVID restrictions. The border was closed for almost 2 years. That had nothing to do with vaccination, or certainly had nothing to do with ArriveCAN. It had everything to do with the pandemic. The problem is, as I see it, is everybody blends all of these together, and ArriveCAN becomes the symbol for the problem, when really it's a solution to a lot of problems at the border. So, sir, now I'll let you finish answering the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. I like to break it down into thirds. And for our customer base, and again, I'll repeat, about 80% of our customer base, and I think that's probably pretty factual for most of the automotive tooling industry in Windsor-Essex County, is U.S. customer base. So of that, about a third of my customer base, no problem. You're absolutely right. They're fully vaccinated. They have no problem with the technology. They have no problem uploading apps on their phones and coming across. That wasn't an issue. We've got another third or so who are fully vaccinated U.S. citizens and just fundamentally take issue with having a foreign government application on their work phone or on their personal phone. And then I've got another third where they may not be vaccinated. And, without getting into the politics of that and the situation there, maybe it sounds like they're going to be able to travel now. But long term, up until just a week ago, it sounded like those folks were going to become lepers and there was just nowhere for them to go. And I was unfortunately never going to be able to do business with them. Starting a new business from what we do, we need those people to come over, spend time with us, see our facilities, engage with our staff, we're talking $1 million contracts on a regular basis. I need that interaction with those people at our
Sir,
facility.
you're still going to face the obstacle of unvaccinated people trying to cross the border because of the U.S. restrictions. Is that fair?
Yeah,
And in Windsor, in particular, where I lived for 2 years, I'm familiar with the auto sector and how important it is. So, I mean, again, I think with all due respect, we're blurring a number of factors here together. So, for example, when witnesses talk about staffing shortages, the staffing shortages, if they exist now, existed pre-pandemic because people were laid off, and if they're not brought back, if you look at the airport example, which I referred to a second ago, once we saw the restrictions lifted in earlier this year at airports for flying, we didn't miraculously see things improve because the airlines face challenges, the airport authorities face challenges, a number of other organizations face challenges. So to blame it all on the ArriveCan app, I think is unfair.
I only want to speak specifically to a group of individuals who are interested in awarding contracts to Canadian businesses and have the option to go elsewhere. So they don't have to come to us. And by not making whether it's applications, the interaction with the border guards, all those steps along the way, without easing that and making it as comfortable and as welcoming as possible, we run the risk of losing that business either to American companies or to foreign, outside of North America.
Thank you very much. Mr. Beeger, now that we think you have no technical issues, would you like to go forward and give us your opening statement? Mr. Beeger, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello?
There you are.
Okay, sorry about that. Just a quick opening statement. So basically, again, what we've seen from our side is a combination of the three things. You've got the staffing shortage, CBSA, and actually that is a real problem. We took a look at the Victoria Day holiday, Memorial Day, and the Canada Day, 4th of July weekends. And of those three different holidays, it was clear that the CBSA staff was much shorter than it was pre-pandemic. What we're also seeing is the vaccination requirement, along with the ArriveCan, has slowed times down. So the problem, again, is differentiating between the ArriveCan and the reporting requirement. So from our side, it's really the two go hand in hand. And you need to take a look at both together. And if you didn't have the vaccination requirement, you wouldn't need the ArriveCan.
Thank you very much. On to Monsieur Savard Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Alors, bonjour.
Good morning to all of the witnesses. Thank you for your testimony. My first question, and I'm surprised that it hasn't been really asked, it was referred to slightly, but there was the idea that this would be optional as of Saturday, and I think that the best person to answer this would be Mr. Weber, probably, from the Immigration and Customs Union. What do you anticipate? Clearly, it will take a few months before we'll be able to really assess this change in direction, and probably even after the holidays when we'll see new waves of travelers, we'll have a better idea. But currently, do you have at least an impression of what will happen with this change, this moving from mandatory to optional?
Thank you. We actually don't. We've not been consulted. We were not consulted when ArriveCan was first made a requirement. We were not consulted on how it should be laid out. We weren't really consulted on what's going to happen once it's made optional or how that's going to look. If it increases travel, no longer having the requirement that ArriveCan be completed, I mean, again, our staffing shortages are not going away. That's something that exists and has gotten worse year after year after year for quite a few years. we're in a place now where if travel does start to significantly increase, we're going to see significant delays at our borders. The big worry that we have when we talk about technologies, and I know there were comments about the Toronto Airport Authority being very excited about the new uses for ArriveCAN and further technology, is that our officers are much faster than any machine that's been installed at an airport. If you really want to keep things flowing and have the border move, we simply need more people in place, not technology.
Très bien, mais quand
That's fine, but even if you weren't consulted, which is most unfortunate, don't hesitate if you have any impressions or thoughts that you could get in contact with the members of this committee. Ms. Barrett, earlier a colleague spoke to you saying there'll be no going back to normal, given that the requirements are still in effect in the United States. And we have an expression regarding that in Quebec, but you didn't really have the chance to answer, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to do so now.
Very much for that. I think tying ArriveCAN to the vaccination status is not purely accurate. I know I have anecdotes from across Canada of our store owners and their staff being IT experts in trying to fill out the ArriveCAN for people who just didn't know how, and then also those who didn't even have smartphones to be able to do it. I think a concrete example of how the ArriveCAN was a deterrent for people even coming to the border, and a concrete example of that is our store in Fort Erie on July long weekend would typically see 40 motor coaches of mostly elderly people come across the border and stop in at the store. 40 motor coaches full of customers. And this year they saw two motor coaches. And the staff at the motor coach company say it was because the elderly folks did not know how to fill out the ArriveCAN. They were scared of it, and they just chose not to come. And I just think that that's an example of how the ArriveCAN was just a deterrent for people to even try to cross the border, vaccinated or not. Thank you.
Donc, je résumerai bien.
So I'll sum it up in saying that you're making a distinction between optional vaccination, which is another debate, and the application of this app.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Je sais pas si j'ai bien compris. I don't know if I understood. On the issue, the fact that the United States is still requiring, as was mentioned, vaccination, so in the end it doesn't change anything. But where you're saying that taking away the app is another discussion, another issue, apart from mandatory vaccinations.
100% it is. It's a completely different issue. Thank you.
Parfait, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I'm curious, how many of your stores are in areas where vaccinations are still required?
Canadian side.
In Canada, but aren't there buffer zones, for example, in airports where people are waiting to fly to other countries? So did you see losses in those zones as well?
So all of our stores are on the land border. So when you go into the store, you have to exit immediately into the United States. You can't come back into Canada. So we're export only. You have to cross the border once you enter our stores.
Okay, donc vous représentez.
Okay, so you don't represent the boutiques that are in the airports, if I understand correctly. Okay, thank you. And thank you for that clarification.
J'aurais envie aussi.
I would like to wrap up with Mr. Weber from the Customs Union on this issue. Indeed, have you seen that difference? Does it not change anything with ArriveCAN, given that there is still a mandatory vaccination requirement on the American side? Do you share that impression?
Answer, Mr. Weber?
It's difficult for us to say. We only deal with travelers when they're returning into Canada, so what's going on the other way is really difficult for us to comment on. Again, what we have seen with the ArriveCan app when it was in place, though, is the greatest difficulty that we had was that people simply didn't know that they had to complete the app, or we had some cases where people just refused to fill it out. So we had to deal with a good, 30 to 40% of travelers arriving without it completed, which caused the 4 or 5 hour lineups that we saw. So it wasn't so much a matter of not being able to, it was simply not wanting to, or not even knowing that it was a requirement, which more often than not was the issue.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Massey for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I want to acknowledge that I'd like to see if we can carve out some time to deal with a motion I've tabled with regards to container shippers. There's been talks with the parties side to see about doing that motion today if possible, because there is urgency with that matter and also planning for our schedule. And so I'm going to quickly go to Mr. Weber. One of the first times I realized there was such a lack of ignorance, or an incredible amount of ignorance in the Hill here with regards to our customs officer is when Derek Lee called them wimps in the House of Commons. And I always remember that moment because there was a lack of understanding of what they faced with the thousands of people they deal with on a per daily basis, especially in a riding like mine. And this challenges that we face, I'm still advocating for a safe border task force to deal with this because we have long border issues to continue. But Mr. Weber, would it be fair to say, you finally got another collective agreement, it's going to run out again soon because it's always coming in late. It's ridiculous that it happens like this. Is it fair to say, and I want to be careful with this language, that your officers could have actually refused to do the work and the extra stuff that they did dealing with these apps and technology devices that was thrust upon them to deal with it? Is it fair to say that could have been a consideration that they didn't have to go that extra mile that they did?
Well, the bad news is that our contract actually is expired now. Were we in a legal strike position at the time? Obviously, I don't know where that would have gone. But I can say that our officers have absolutely gone above and beyond to make things, flow as quickly as possible under incredible odds. We're dealing with 4 or 5, 6 hour lineups of travelers who obviously are arriving at our counter extremely irate at what they're having to go through to cross into Canada. I'm hearing from one of our officers in Niagara Falls that he's had travelers come through who had actually urinated and defecated themselves, having been stuck in the car for so long. To give you an idea of how terrible and drastic the situation at our borders was and how terribly short-staffed we are, I think that says it all.
And I do appreciate you raising the issue over training, because we could actually have the Tilson Armory in Windsor converted into a training facility. Actually, it's the first one done with the Department of National Defense, has a gun facility and range testing and all there and all the operations. I hope that something is looked at like that, because it could be almost close to turnkey for that, especially with the Gordy coming on board and everything else in the upcoming years. I do want to move to Ms. Barrett, but I want to finish by saying to Mr. Weber, thank you and your members. By the way, just for the record, our frontline officers at the border did not have a vaccination program put in place. We had to fight for that, and it took over a year. They actually were spot vaccinated despite being on the front lines during COVID. From the very beginning, they weren't considered essential and had to deal with that. That was something that was wrong, and hopefully we can fix that in the future for further challenges, because we've had SARS now and this and that. To Ms. Barrett, real quickly, when we did the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative changes, that's the U.S. requiring passports, we knew that 60% of U.S. citizens would get a passport, 40% they would never get a passport. That was just the raw data. Is that what you're experiencing too now with Americans with regards to this foreign application? Mr. Lovegrove noted that as well too, and that's what I've heard a lot. It's not, there are some people, vaccination's an issue, but the vast thing over Arrive Canada, from the thousands of complaints I received, were not from unvaccinated people. They were from vaccinated people. And Americans were particularly problematic about signing on to a foreign government's application.
I think the fact that the vaccination rate of the Americans was far or less than the Canadians certainly has some effect. But yes, the broad scale of the issues were coming from vaccinated folks who would like to come over but couldn't. I'll give another example of how it was difficult for them. The ArriveCan app asks for you to give an address of where you would quarantine in Canada should you have to when you're there. Which doesn't make sense if you're trying to cross the border, go shopping for the day, and come back. You don't have an address of where you're going. So it just didn't take into account how border communities, you would know how they work, and how people would come across and shop, and it really affected our stores that way. It was just a deterrent for people to come.
Can you confirm, I mean, before COVID, there were some border changes that affected duty-free, and I'm not sure everybody's, you have to really be part of a border community to understand duty-free a little bit more intimately. Like, people think they're like part of the border, but they're actually mom-and-pop shops, really.
Yes. Yeah.
There was a change where we got rid of the GST refund before COVID.
Yes.
And then on top of that, they changed the amount of you could actually bring back and forth without duty charges before COVID. Is that not correct? And that had a substantial hit on the industry to start with.
Yeah, our industry has been seeing some challenges even before COVID. As you say, with the visitor rebate program being eliminated, that used to operate within our stores. People would go in, get their rebate, get the cash, and then actually spend it back into the economy in Canada. So that did have a great effect on our business. But then once COVID hit, we were 95% down for 20 months.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah, and then hence that you have the package requirement. Real quickly, Mr. Lovegrove, now you mentioned about doing business. Now, you fall under a lot of the access to employment contracts you can get out of NAFTA, but Mexicans don't have something like ArriveCan, never had it. U.S. never had something like ArriveCan, never had it. How difficult was it to explain to your American and your Mexican business opportunities doing this, what they didn't have to do? And it's ironic because every other policies we fight to get synced up to compete, but this one was really personal, I understand, from the people affected.
A brief answer, sir?
Yeah, there was a few times where we were on the phone helping people fill it out, working as the IT consultant for our U.S. customer base, trying to help them get across the border. And the fact that it wasn't synced up, yeah, definitely an issue. And I'll just mention one more thing really quickly. Part of it, yes, separate the vaccination from the ArriveCan. The original language used in ArriveCan and on the website was very threatening. There was quarantines, there was $5,000 fines, very threatening language, huge deterrent for people even taking the chance of coming over.
Very much, Mr. Ellis. Mr. Lewis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses here this morning. Great testimony once again. I just start out by saying this is a study to study the impacts that ArriveCan has had, and would have had on Canada. So I think all of these questions are really good. So I'm gonna stick on the business side of things, Madam Chair, and I got to tell you, am I ever looking forward to October the 1st coming? I wish it would have been October 1st, 2021, because I would have had a few thousand less inquiries into my office. But I am looking forward to October the 1st. But I think to Mr. Maloney's point in his line of questionings to Mr. Lovegrove, I think we got to go back to, okay, so when the October the 1st comes, is that going to magically fix everything? Well, let's talk about the privacy issues and the fines that ArriveCan had. Let's talk about the glitches, the quarantines because of the glitches, and the access to self-service. And why I say all that, Madam Chair, is because the business and the contracts that have been lost will never, ever come back. We will never, ever see those again. When it's gone forever. We're in the relationships that the likes of Mr. Lovegrove and so many other hundreds of businesses across Essex, Windsor, when those contracts are gone, they are gone for good. And so it's had major, major impacts on our region specifically. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Lovegrove, it's my understanding in that a business such as yours, sir, Zoom is not an option. You're not going to sell a few $1 million worth of goods to stamp out incredibly important auto parts without, and if I was your customer, I certainly wouldn't use Zoom or a video to say, yeah, I think that pretty much meets the spec. You got to taste it, you got to feel it, you got to see it, you got to be in the room with it, and usually that's only a 1 or 2 hour deal. I know that you had mentioned a lot of business lost. Mr. Lovegrove, can you tell me, generally speaking, any idea of how much business you've lost or potential in contracts and or what the industry locally, so Windsor Essex, has seen?
Yeah, I can certainly speak to my own situation where there was several $1 million worth of contracts that we were, I would say, not considered for, given the situation we found ourselves in, because these customers, being a new business, doors open, we want people up, come see the facility, visit with our staff, see our capabilities. The fact that they couldn't come up or wouldn't come up because of the situation they found themselves in with the ArriveCan prevented that from ever happening. So can I put a firm number on it? I'll never know. I just know that there was multiple opportunities that we've never realized, and hopefully, working we can get those relationships on the go again and get them up now. But yeah, what's been lost is lost.
Thank you.
For the local area, just quickly on that, I don't want to speak for other tool shops, automation shops within the area, but I can only imagine it must be on the magnitude of hundreds of millions of dollars.
It takes a lot of guts, Mr. Lovegrove, to start a business in the middle of COVID. It takes a lot of guts to start a business in Canada, period. But specifically during COVID, and it's not a small endeavor. Really important though for our region and for Canadians. And so as I wrap up here, I got 1 minute left. A quick story, Madam Chair. I got a phone call about a month and a half, 2 months ago, from a major player in the area, and they had their private jet sitting on the apron at the Windsor Airport with the 4 top executives. And when I say a major business, I mean a major business. And they couldn't get off because one of the 4, their ArriveCan app had a glitch. And so they decided to just leave. So, all that to be said, is my line of thinking correct, Mr. Lovegrove, in that it's not just your business that was affected?
Yeah, absolutely. It's across multiple industries, across multiple regions throughout Canada. Anybody dealing with the U.S. customer base.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Miao for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses attending here today to look at the impact that Arrive can have for us. First, I'd like to start. I want to ask how many people in this room or online have ever used the ArriveCan app? And, yep, that's good. And I guess the main purpose of it is to allow us to check for our vaccination status, to really protect Canadians across the nation. Being in my riding of Richmond Centre, YVR Vancouver Airport is also part of my riding. I've heard from my constituents a lot that, it is troublesome to fill out that app. But after filling that app, they do feel a lot more comfortable in traveling to Canada because they are really experiencing the feeling of pre-pandemic to enjoy what they're here to enjoy in Canada for. One question I do want to ask, how can ArriveCan be exclusively liable for the decrease of export level exclusively? If any of the witness can answer to that.
Whoever would like to answer that?
Yeah, maybe
Ms.
Ms. Barrett?
I don't think I would say that it's exclusively responsible. I would say that anything that makes the border more sticky than it should be. It was most certainly a pain point, but there were other pain points, and our numbers bear that out.
Okay. And thank you for that. And maybe Mr. Lovegrove, if you have something to add to that.
Could you just clarify the question for me?
So, how can ArriveCan be exclusively liable for the decrease of export level exclusively?
Yeah, I would agree that it is not exclusively. However, in our situation, it is the majority of the issue for business.
Okay, and I understand there is definitely a lot of impact during the pandemic to many businesses across our nations. However, we do understand, I do understand that now that we're in a recovery process, economies across the nation have been thriving. and even better than pre-pandemic level. However, one biggest shortfall is that we are experiencing a lot of staff shortages. So I personally do look forward on October 1st of the removal being optional. However, does any of the witness feel that after October 1st, business will be back to normal, like Ms. Barrett, you mentioned in your statement, and whether or not there are other challenges that we might encounter? Please.
So perhaps I misspoke by saying back to normal, but I think what I meant was that the pain points have been removed. I think we have a long road before it's back to normal. The travelers, the tourist habits have been changed. They now need to be re-educated that now that it's optional. So I think we have a lot of work to do to re-educate and to get those habits back to what they were pre-pandemic.
I think you mentioned a very good word here, is re-educate. Personal experience, after the restriction have lifted, my family had made a visit to Switzerland. And my mother being 65 years old, she does have trouble filling out the ArriveCAN app. However, spending about 10-15 minutes of my time teaching her how to go through the process, yes, this may delay the process of the lineup, and shortages of CBSA may not address that issue with the help on the technology that some people may experience. However, if this is to protect Canadians, do you feel the extra 50 minutes of our time or individuals' time to use that app to make other Canadians feel safe is a necessary step to move forward?
May I?
Yeah.
I would, if I felt that it was keeping Canadians safe, then I would certainly be on board. I don't see the evidence that it was keeping Canadians safe when we were in a community spread situation. However, I think it's also presumptuous of us to assume that everyone has a smartphone. If my mother was trying to cross the border, she would be unable to because she doesn't have a smartphone. And we had motor coaches full of seniors who did not even approach the border because that was the case for them also.
And I think.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, your time is up.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. Alors.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, you were here in June, and you told us that already at that point in time, ArriveCAN was not facilitating trans-border crossings, and that there were a lot of difficulties in terms of the effectiveness of it, the operational effectiveness. So I think the delays at the border spiked with it. So during the summer, it wasn't easy. There are many cases that we read about in the media, and they weren't all exclusively related to ArriveCAN, of course. But despite everything over the course of the summer, did you sense some improvement because people were slowly getting used to it and used to things?
Thank you for the question. No, we didn't. It was fairly consistent in terms of the number of people that were arriving at the border without having completed the application.
So there wasn't any evolution in that. Now, if the health situation were to worsen and that we needed to impose border restrictions again, what would you recommend so that we don't repeat errors of the past?
I think if it's simply a matter of confirming that people are vaccinated, that's done much more simply than having to complete a separate application. Surely there's a way where when a passport is scanned, we can get the information on whether or not someone's vaccinated. We're all getting vaccinated through government programs. Either that or simply have a traveler show us their phone, our vaccination status and our certification shows up on our phone. I think the real question is, what's the necessity of the app and all those additional questions? What address are you staying at? What port of entry are you coming through? A lot of those things that gave people trouble, especially when we got to a point where we were no longer doing any contact tracing. I think that's really where the questions have to be asked. That's where all the extra time is being taken up. And I think that's a big reason why people were having trouble completing it.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Massey for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick to Mr. Weber. your officers that you represent, they are trained for personal action to do analysis of those individuals for other issues like guns, smuggling of drugs, and so forth. And that interaction, how important that is at protecting Canadians and for them to get a snapshot as an individual coming over the border. That's what I worry about, some of the automation. Obviously, a machine can't do that. How much training goes into your officers for that, and is it also training that is constantly renewed?
It is constantly renewed. We go through a lengthy program of training at Rigo. We learn throughout our careers. We try different modes. We specialize. We join different teams. You're right. It's all about that interaction, that ability to read indicators and be able to do that interdiction that we need to do. That's our primary concern. The more automation that we add on, the less interaction we have with travelers. No machine's going to tell you if someone's lying. And obviously, when you're just relying on people's self-declarations, no one smuggling is going to self-declare that they are doing so.
And quickly over to Ms. Barrett, how much of your members have been investing in their properties to get them ready and also continuing to keep staff on board? I don't think things will return the way they are. I understood what you meant. The structure is the same, but getting the culture back is going to be very difficult. In fact, even in Windsor, we couldn't even do the only bus in the world that actually goes across international boundaries is in Windsor, is finally going to hopefully return. How much investment are your members making?
Right now, our members are in survival mode. They've had to take out some financial loans just to survive at this point. There are a few we're not sure are even going to survive. So I don't know if you're looking for a number, a dollar number, but I would say that because we're still at 50% down, we're very much in survival mode.
Okay, so just stay alive. I know the facilities are in tip-top shape, but they're still, and a lot of them I know kept staff on during COVID.
They did, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. On to Ms. Ferrari for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses here today, and thank you for letting me sub in as Shadow Minister to Tourism. Happy to be here on World Tourism Day. I'm going to start, if I may, with Ms. Barrett. Ms. Barrett, how many times did you meet with anyone from the Liberal government to communicate your serious concerns with ArriveCAN?
A number of times. I think I became known as a squeaky wheel. So I did meet with the Minister of Public Safety, and I met with the Transport Minister's office a number of times. I don't have an exact number, but I will say several.
I'm going to ask you another number question. Okay. I promise this will be the last one.
Okay.
How much money do you believe has been lost due to ArriveCAN to the businesses that you represent?
Well, I would have to do some quick math, but overall, our industry is on average 50% down compared to pre-pandemic.
If you could table that for the community, could you
Sure.
do that for me? This next question I'm going to direct through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Weber. I actually have my passport with me here today, and I'm going to read the front page of my Canadian passport. Please note, obviously, this is not in accordance with the new King, but rather our late Queen, Elizabeth II. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada requests in the name of Her Majesty the Queen all those whom it may concern to allow the bearer to pass freely without delay or hindrance and to afford the bearer such assistance and protection as may be necessary. In your opinion, Mr. Weber, did ArriveCAN hinder Canadians' ability to cross the border?
I would say it did, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I guess I would go on to share a couple of stories when we talk about Mr. Lovegrove. You, I think, you hammered the nail on the head with your comments about threatening and intimidating language. And I think that's really where this conversation needs to go in terms of what the government did to all of these citizens in terms of wrongfully fining Canadians, as well as harassment. I have one constituent who was featured on Global National. She was sent a threatening and intimidating letter that she would be fined $1 million and that she would never be allowed back into her own country. So for the Liberals and the government to say that this Arrive can is just merely an inconvenience for Canadians is insulting. So I would ask Mr. Lovegrove, as somebody who lost this money but still managed to survive, how do you expect to make up the money that was lost as a result of ArriveCan?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. We're going to do it through hard work is what we're going to do. We're going to heavily engage with our customer base in the U.S. We're going to have to do a little bit of campaigning. I'd love to see the government, of course, step up and do some campaigning throughout our areas of business in the U.S. and promote business in Canada. But we're going to get through it through hard work and sharing the story of our business and why they should be coming up and seeing us and
Thank you. One super quick question left for Mr. Weber. Where is the data, and was it shared with you? I know you weren't consulted, but is there any data that indicates it was safer to wait to drop the ArriveCan now than in October of 2021, or even January 2021, February 2021, March 2021? Where is the data that says it is safer to drop it now?
Thank you. I've not seen that data. I think that would be a good question for the Public Health Agency.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. On to Mr. Maloney for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Okay, I want to get back to this issue of separating the ArriveCan from the pandemic measures, because there appears to be a lot of confusion here. Ms. Barrett, you said your business was 95% down. That's because of the pandemic, isn't that right?
That's correct.
That includes because the border measures that were in place and the fact that the border was closed for a long time.
Correct.
So to make that statement in the context of this discussion is not quite fair, because it's not ArriveCan, it was the pandemic, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Lovegrove, you talk about threatening language and the questions were intimidating on the app. Those were, in fact, border measures that were introduced by the Canadian government and other governments, I might add, but they were on the ArriveCan app, which was there to prevent the border agents from having to ask you and me those questions. So it's not the ArriveCan app, it's the border measures, correct?
I don't know the legality of who was making the...
But you'll agree with me that the ArriveCan app is just the platform on which those questions are asked.
Specifically, in my notes I forwarded to the committee, what I pulled off that threatening language was from a Canadian government travel
Correct.
website.
So it's not the app; it's the rules imposed by the Canadian government.
Sure.
Okay. So it's not the app. Thank you. Okay. Now, Mr. Lewis mentioned earlier the example of these 4 gentlemen sitting in their private jet at the airport. If I come to the border with you, Mr. Lovegrove, and you, Ms. Barrett, and Mr. Massey over there, and we all have Nexus cards, and I forgot mine, is that a glitch in the Nexus system, or is that my inability to remember my card?
Obviously.
It's a rhetorical question.
Yes, obviously.
Okay. Okay. My point is, we have to distinguish between the border measures that were in place, the pandemic itself, and the ArriveCan app. So let me ask you another question. Do you believe that there's a scenario in which technology can be used to make it easier to get across the border?
Yes.
Ms. Barrett?
I do, and I think the optional measure is a good start.
Thank you. And what about the other witnesses? Do you believe there's a scenario in which technology can be used to make it easier to get across the border?
I could say yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Definitely.
Eager, I think, wants to comment there. He was raising his hand.
No, I was just going to say definitely technology would benefit in moving traffic quicker across the bridge. It's just got to be done the right way. One of the things that we saw, I think this decision with ArriveCan was done unilaterally by CBSA and the Canadian government. There should have been workshops, discussions with all the stakeholders involved to try and work through this before it was ever implemented.
Okay, thank you, sir. Which leads me to my next question, which is to you, because You said earlier, if I'm not mistaken, if we didn't have one, we wouldn't need the other. And I interpret that to mean that if we didn't have the pandemic measures, we wouldn't need ArriveCan. Is that what you meant?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay, thank you. So, and yet you agree with me that there is a scenario in which technology can be used to easier facilitate getting across the border. So we need to separate the two. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ms. Barrett, I'm going to go back to you. You used the phrase less sticky. We all agree that it would be nice to be less sticky getting through the border. I'm old enough to remember when I could cross the border to go with just my driver's license. In fact, I'm old enough to remember when they might not have asked me for anything at all. When I lived in Windsor, where Mr. Lewis and Mr. Massey are from, I might have gone across the border the odd time to have dinner or do some other things. And it was quite easy. So when people introduced the requirement that you had to use a passport or some other, people were, that makes it more sticky, correct?
I guess so, yes.
Sure.
Yep.
So then a technology that can help us make it faster is in fact making it less sticky. So I put it to you again that do you agree with me that it is unfair to lump the ArriveCan app itself, a technology that's used to facilitate quick access across the border, with all of these other things, like the pandemic, which caused you to lose business? Or the measures that were put in place of that? Because Ms. Barrett, Mr. Lovegrove, I want your business to succeed. We all do. But we have to stop playing politics with these things and, talk about what the real issues here. And it was the pandemic, not an app on our phone.
May I respond?
You may respond.
I think it's unfair to assume that everyone would be able to deal with this technology, and to presume that everyone would have a smartphone to be able to manage it.
Couldn't agree with you more, which is why I agree with Mr. Lovegrove that making it optional is a good idea, and let's solve the glitches rather than kill the program.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maloney. On to Mr. Baldinelli for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just following up on my colleague's comments about, making it less sticky. I mean, that was the whole point. I mean, the government liked to talk about CBSA compliance about 90%, and it was facilitating travel, but it wasn't doing that. I mean, we had an order paper question that was just responded to that showed from January to August 31st of this year, a total of 1.6 million travelers presented themselves at the border for entry into Canada without having submitted ArriveCan, which just adds to Mr. Beeger's point on land borders. During the long weekends, we were having lineups of over 2 hours, yet traffic was 50% less from 2019 figures. The government didn't even consult its CBSA officers prior to the implementation of this program. If you're going to create a program, do it right. Consult with the stakeholders. We're the bridge commissions. We're our American customs officers brought into the conversations about this. Let's do it. Let's do it right. I mean, to Ms. Barrett's point about after the pandemic programming and supports ended in the spring, fair enough. That's a government decision. But if you're going to do that, let's get out of the way. Let's remove the disincentives that still stand in the way from them being able to create the wealth that they need to survive. These businesses were down 95%. I live in a community that has American visitation that is over 50% of the revenues generated for my tourism sector. $2.4 billion in tourism receipts generated in 2019 alone. That was devastated. American visitation, although not the largest number, again, they're 50% of the revenues that are generated. And why are we putting these disincentives to travel in place? That's what we've got to get to. ArriveCan was part of the problem there. And so when we say to the Frontier Duty Free Associations, when we say to our tourism businesses in Niagara, all the programming is ended, you're on your own, well, get out of the way then. Let them do what it is they do best in my community, and that's welcome people from throughout the world. So that's my concern about the ArriveCan app. That's why I've been arguing against it from the very day that it was put in place. Now, to Mr. Beeger, because of COVID and because of the pandemic, you've seen traffic volumes down 50%. The financial impact on the Niagara Falls Bridge Commission has to be tremendous. What is that impact? I know there were government programs, but your commission is not owned and operated by the federal government, which can support the other 4 bridges in its jurisdictions in Ontario. So were there any other supports provided other than what the government did for everyone else?
No, the only support that we received was some of the workforce labor incentives that and grants that we received. But as far as reaching out to the Canadian government and the U.S. government, to be honest with you, for financial assistance, we did not really get a good answer as to why we weren't. We weren't involved in the closing of the bridges for unnecessary traffic, and so it was our position that both Canadian and U.S. government should have come to our aid when we needed it. We lost probably $30 million in revenue first 2 years. Traffic, again, is probably at about 55% right now. So we're still not back to where we were before. But this is, a combination with the ArriveCAN and the vaccination requirement. Now that the vaccination requirement will go away as of October 1st, Canadian bound, we're going to see an improvement, but we're still not going to be at 100%.
And the biggest impact, would it be on the Rainbow Bridge? I mean, you've got your commercial facilities over at Queenston, Lewiston. Did you notice same drops in volume?
A little more drop in volume on Rainbow, but it's pretty significant on both, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right. Okay. Madam Lapointe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be directing my questions to Ms. Barbara Barrett. I'll share some data with you, and then I'll ask you for your thoughts on some of the data that I'll share. So compared to other countries, Canadian goods exports performed relatively well in the first quarter of 2020. They declined by only 1.2% year over year. China's good exports, by comparison, were hit hard in that first quarter, falling by 10%. What factors do you think supported Canada's ability to better maintain trade levels when compared to other countries such as China?
I can't answer about trades to China, but what I know is that our export business is dependent upon the land border being open and people being able to travel by car over across the U.S. and Canada border. They have not been able to do that for over 2 years now in an unencumbered way. So
if you can't comment on other countries, what about Canada's performance on exports in that first quarter, dropping only by 1.2%?
Again, we are dependent upon people being able to go back and forth over the land border, and they have not been able to do that in an unencumbered way.
So the United States saw a change in export levels greater than 3%, and Japan saw a decline of 5.5%. Given the United States did not have an ArriveCAN program in place, why do you believe that countries like the United States and Japan saw significantly more dramatic drops in export levels?
Again, I can't answer for Japan or other, we are solely dependent on the U.S.-Canada border. Our stores are not 50% down because they made bad business decisions or because they have a bad business model. They are in the position of being 50% down because of the border being having measures on the border.
So do you believe any other contributing factors, excluding ArriveCAN, contributed to the decline in export levels in Canada experienced during the pandemic?
I think that tourism habits, traveler habits changed over the period of the pandemic. I think people just weren't used to going over the border in the way that they were before, and the vaccination requirements and the ArriveCAN.
And how would have exports been impacted if instead of implementing the ArriveCAN app, the government had implemented stricter, broader restrictions to prevent the spread of COVID?
I'm sorry, can you ask your question again?
So how do you believe exports would have been impacted if instead of implementing ArriveCan, the government had decided to implement stricter border restrictions?
So stricter border restrictions, but no ArriveCan?
Correct.
I'm not sure what stricter border restrictions there would have been.
So to prevent the spread of COVID,
Sure.
the government could have taken other measures. What are your thoughts on one of those measures being stricter border restrictions and what impact that would have had on exports?
Anything that encumbers the border, for people being able to pass over in their car, affects our businesses. So we were already 95% down when only essential workers were allowed to cross over. So I'm not, other than 100%, I'm not sure how much worse it could get. And when the border did open to more than essential workers, we were at 50% down. So.
But we've already established that
Yeah.
the 95% is not because of ArriveCan.
No, that was because the border was closed. Correct.
I'm going to ask that. Okay. Quickly to you, Mr. Lovegrove, can you answer that last question as well?
Apologize, could you repeat the question and clarify it?
How would exports have been impacted instead of implementing ArriveCan if we had instead implemented stricter border restrictions?
I can only imagine that we would have saw a further reduction in exports through any more aggressive restrictions.
Thank you.
Mr. Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Look, I think we've really probably been through the questions we want to answer, so I would just ask you what more we can do for you. Please go ahead. I don't know if the interpreter, would you? Oh, you didn't have your earpiece on, so I'll ask it again. I was just saying that I think we've probably pretty much discussed what we can with the questions asked in this study. So what more can we do for you? Just an open question.
To myself personally, I'd like to see the federal government step up with some campaign in the U.S. for tourism, for travel, and specifically for business like ourselves.
Ms. Barrett?
Thank you for asking. We've clearly been the hardest hit of the hardest hit. We have not started to recover fully yet, and we're hoping to as of October 1st. However, the winter is long. We've missed 3 high seasons. We would love to see a loan program that would allow us to get through to the other side of the winter and allow us to survive.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you. The 2 gentlemen online.
I'll go first and say that, from our perspective, it would be nice if the communication between the U.S. government, Canadian government was improved with respect to the border between CBP, CBSA. We went through this whole pandemic, and it just seemed like there was a lack of communication. The timing of some of the openings were different. If we had to go through this again, it would be nice if the coordination, the timing of some of this was rolled out together. It seemed like it was a problem from the beginning. We're still seeing it now. Obviously, October 1st, we haven't heard if the U.S. government is going to eliminate the vaccination requirement. We right now don't think so. We haven't heard anything. But these type of things probably should be communicated and work through a little bit better from both sides. The other thing that, we would like to take a look at, and I think it may be public information, I'm not sure, but, a lot of the testing, the going into Canada through this pandemic, there was a lot of testing done. And I'm not sure, some of the information that I've heard is that the testing positive rate wasn't any higher than what was in Canada in general. So I kind of question, and I know this is more of a health department type issue, but this question was brought up earlier. What really changed this week or in the last couple of weeks versus 6 months ago or a year ago? At the point that the U.S. was at, let's say, 70% vaccinated, and Canadians a few points higher than that, we all strive for the same thing. And I just don't know if there was enough of a reason to keep the U.S.-Canada border closed for a reason of vaccination as long as they did. I understand in the very beginning, but when we got to a point where the vaccination rate was as high as it was, it just seemed that this could have been done a lot earlier, and the border communities would have felt the improvement earlier. And so I think that could be tested by looking at what the test results were of the travelers that came through CBSA that got tested and see what the rates were.
Thank you very much. Mr. Massey, for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little bit taken aback by some of the questioning that's taken place here this afternoon. I'll give a quick example with regards to duty-free. These are small businesses, and even during the pandemic, they came forward with solutions for what they were taking place. In fact, they actually asked to actually donate their goods that were perishables to charities, but the government wouldn't actually provide that change to allow them to do that, so it rotted. They didn't come here to say that ArriveCan destroyed or had implications on their businesses. They came here by invitation to show that it's another barrier that was still in the repertoire of problems that they face on the border and that it needs to be adjusted. And yes, now that it's actually optional, people can use it if they want. They may not want to. And I get the point that you're making, Mr. Lovegrove, with regards to when, and I've heard this from the Americans that I deal with on a regular basis, they go to it, and Mr. Maloney's correct with regards to, like it is on the website and all that stuff, but it's pretty shocking when you're on your personal phone and to read about the fines, the penalties, and all those different things and go through them. They haven't necessarily gone through those things. So sometimes it's the tone of things that's out there. So what didn't happen with regards to this is there wasn't any education program. So when Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative came in, you remember this, Madam Chair, all the time we went to the United States to push, and then there was actually advertising that went out to the United States and so forth. So I'll just conclude with this and saying I want to thank the witnesses and all my colleagues here, but perhaps if we can get in front of some of these things a little bit better, it would be much more helpful. And that's where I think I want to go with it with this study, is to view how we can ameliorate the damage that's taken place and go forward from there. And I'll conclude by saying that for duty-free, again, I never heard any complaints. The border was shut down. These organizations are not generally run by big businesses. Only like the Ambassador Bridge runs one of them, and then the Tac family, a local family, runs the other one. And most of the other ones are all family businesses. They're not a big multinational conglomerate that owns them all, and they have been suffering more than any other businesses because their customers were shut off. They couldn't actually get there. And so this is one of the things we need to ameliorate, because if we're going to have recovery, we need them back in the game. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe that has completed the questions for our witnesses today. And on behalf of all of the committee, I want to say a sincere thank you for all of you for participating today. We know it's been tough. And October 1st, things we hope are going to get that much better. But there's still a lot ahead of us to recover completely. So thank you very much for this information. We will suspend for a few minutes while we go into committee business. Move suspension.
Thank you.
Thank you.